Hello, and welcome to Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and the people and places and events and organizations that make Rhode Island a great place to live, that build our community and protect our resources. So today we have the Audubon Society, the Rhode Island Audubon Society here. I'm very happy to welcome Lawrence Taft and Meg Kerr to the program. Who are going to talk to us about the Rhode Island Audubon and the way that they're working behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes to help us to take care of our wonderful state and all the resources here, which are mind-boggling if you really think about it. So welcome, and I'm sorry for that uneducated introduction, Meg, but tell me, how did you both get involved in this kind of work? I mean, it takes a passion, in my opinion. It takes a vision and a passion and a sense of sort of can-do altruism. So tell me, how did you get started?
Okay, well, I got started, I think, it was a high school experience where during the summer I had a great summer job working on a trail crew for DEM. It was called the Youth Conservation League back in 1976. And until then, I was on a track to probably go on to music school or do theater or something like that. And because that was the kind of things I was involved in. And just the idea of being outside and going out to places like Dutch Island and Prudence Island and seeing the bay. And I grew up in Cranston, so I really wasn't a coastal kid. I was kind of, Roger Williams Park was my neighborhood and that area, but just getting out and seeing the bay and seeing all these great things and learning about trees and forests and the islands, and to me, I decided right then and there that I wanted to study wildlife or forestry or some environmental science in college, so I just changed and signed up at the University of Rhode Island and took all those kind of courses. And
so they were ready for you?
They were ready for me.
In the 70s?
Yeah.
Well, that's really good to know. I didn't realize that things went back that far. I didn't think people were studying the earth then. But that's wonderful. And so then you went on and got a master's degree and
worked for a while, and then 10 years later got another master's degree. Yeah.
In what was it called? Resource?
In natural resources, and
natural
then also
resources.
Right, exactly.
So I didn't know you could find a degree in natural resources, but that's wonderful.
Well, nowadays I guess they call it environmental management, but
I
yeah.
see. Mm-hmm. So that's the track someone might take in order to get involved in caring for the earth in their career. How about you, Meg?
So I grew up at about the same time that Larry did in New York, outside of New York City, and my parents were environmentalists. So we recycled before you could recycle easily. We saved all of our cans and bottles and drove 3 towns away to put it in a big bin. And we did a lot. My mother never dried clothes in a dryer. We always hung them out. We did a lot of things that were environmental. And when I went to college, I did have trouble finding environmental programs to study. I ended up going to Brown, and I studied biology, but they didn't at the time have an environmental science program. And it wasn't until my graduate program in North Carolina at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill that I was able to find a program in environmental science. And it was specifically on water quality, which is what I was most interested in.
And had you lived near water?
Yeah, well, so my family has a summer home up on the St. Lawrence River. And so every summer of my life, I went up to the St. Lawrence River. And where I grew up was very close to the Hudson River. My grandmother and my cousins lived in Irvington on Hudson, right next to the Hudson River, right near the Tappan Zee Bridge. So yeah, water was always a very big part of my life.
So it was really childhood experiences that led you both. And putting all of these issues into the schools is going to be a really important way to get more and more educators
Absolutely.
and workers in the environmental field.
Mm-hmm.
So the National Audubon, which you are a spin-off of, I assume, or something, or
just
somehow
the opposite.
related to. Okay, so the National Audubon grew out of you. Why don't you tell me?
Okay, I'll pitch that
Absolutely.
one. The Rhode Island Audubon is the second or third oldest Audubon in the country. The first ones were in New York and Massachusetts, and those were formed in 1896. We were formed in 1897. And as the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, there were several Audubons that kind of got started with this movement. And the idea was the protection of birds against the mass slaughter for fashion, for hats, ladies' hats. With that,
Ethan Audubon murdered a lot of birds or killed a lot
well,
of
true.
birds.
Well, he did. Back in the day, well, we can.
Anyway, they were seen as replaceable.
They were
I
seen as
guess.
replaceable. That's right. And so, what was happening though is that a lot of birds were very near extinction: egrets and herons and terns, and that's why terns are our logo. And with finally the pass of the Lacey Act and the International Migratory Bird Treaty between the U.S. and Canada, it came down to you can't just shoot birds and kill them wantonly. There had to be some regulations. And so it wasn't until 1941 that the Association of Audubons decided to become an organization, and that was the formation of National Audubon Society. But the early New England ones, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, New Jersey, all decided we liked our independence. And so we did not become part of the national organization. And we've had this sort of dual identity ever since. We get along quite well with the National Audubon Society. They do things kind of on a national level, but also they have state offices. We work the independence in our state. And one of the things that I like to be able to say to people is that every penny of a dollar that you donate to Audubon is put to work here in Rhode Island, as opposed to sent someplace else to support a national office.
Okay, so probably there's New England coalition of some sort, which helps you all work together in New England, which is a very particular kind of greenery and a very particular kind of land. And
Yep.
probably, I mean, certainly in the summer, the birds are similar in each state. I am thinking, going back to an earlier topic, of being in the halls, near the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles, and Louis XV, I believe it was, had huge cases of birds from the United States, from then the colonies, whatever, that were displayed, and someone was taking all these captives and putting them on boards and sending them to Louis for elaborate showcase. Anyway, that was very shocking to me to realize even back then we were sort of abusing our wildlife. So your work, your motto, your pledge, your direction is for care of birds in a safe habitat. Is that
Well, our
stating
mission
it?
really is it's the protection of birds and other wildlife in their habitats through conservation of land, education, and advocacy. And it's really for the benefit of people, but also other forms of life. That's our mission.
So they're all in this together. I mean,
Yes.
we're all in this together,
We're all
and the
in
more we
together.
learn that, the better. So how has the policy part of this happened? Are you working well with the state house, with the city's councils, and all that kind of political organization?
So Rhode Island has a really vibrant environmental advocacy community. I know you were just speaking with Alicia Lehrer with the Woonasquatucket River Watershed Council. So there's some 10 watershed organizations. There's about 40 land trusts in the state. We've got Save the Bay, the Nature Conservancy, and others that I haven't named. So there's lots and lots of organizations. And many years ago, the executive director of Audubon, Al Hawks, helped form a coalition of environmental organizations for the state called the Environment Council of Rhode Island, ECRI. ECRI is still a vibrant organization, and we all work together on issues and policy through ECRI. And that gives us a louder voice when we're working on policies with legislators or with our executive agencies.
So people are going to Washington, having been educated in this state, with a really fine-tuned advocacy for the environment. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Anyway, Reed or White House.
White House. I mean, we're so fortunate in this state when it comes to our national advocacy. We've got the whole team with us. They're environmentally minded leaders. It's rare that we have to push them on issues because they're generally in our court.
But politically, things are rough right now for all of the organizations.
We need to, yeah.
And so you are working with them, but also working very hard here for all of us to learn more and more so that we can support you as well.
Yeah, we focus most of our policy work at the Audubon Society of Rhode Island on Rhode Island-based advocacy for the very reason that I said. We're lucky that we don't have to put a lot of our time and energy and money into national lobbying, because we're only really effective in lobbying our own elected officials, and they're on our team. We don't have to worry about them.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, it is. We're very fortunate.
So what is happening with birds now? I've been trying to watch. I certainly see fewer and fewer, hear fewer and fewer. But I hear that there's some flocks that are getting restored. So what's happening?
Well, there's been a couple of rather landmark studies that were released recently, one through Cornell, and then another one with National Audubon Society. And the one in Cornell looks at bird populations through a variety of different angles, from Christmas bird counts to bird banding stations to various breeding bird atlas data. And it seems that across the country, at least 30% of the bird numbers, just sheer numbers of birds, since 1970, which is about the time DDT was just banned, we're talking about songbirds, have really just disappeared. So we have 30% less birds than we had 40 years ago. Now, the diversity of bird species has not really changed all that much. And these are, again, national studies, and it's kind of a broad brush. But Rhode Island Audubon also is involved with the University of Rhode Island, and we run a bird banding station in Kingston. It's the longest run bird banding station in North America, and with Rhode Island Audubon owns the station, and we fund the station. Our local bird census through URI backs up pretty much what's also observed nationally, that bird species from diversity point of view has not really decreased, but the sheer numbers of birds coming through and getting misnetted and marked has really dropped significantly. And with the banding station, you're only going to get certain kinds of birds that will fly through a forest. And shorebirds are, obviously wouldn't be at the station. But also, there's the breeding bird atlas that the state is now doing a second phase, and there was one done back in the 1980s. Again, it shows that we've lost some species, like the bobwhite was here 30 years ago, is no longer here, but we have new introduced birds. So again, the diversity is not different, but some trends which could be disturbing or could be part of natural succession. For instance, kestrels are disappearing, but Cooper's hawks are increasing. Well, that has a lot to do with the fact that we're losing open fields, and a lot of Rhode Island's forests are maturing, just making better habitat for woodland birds. At the same time, we may have other birds that maybe, when I was a child, cardinals were pretty rare in Rhode Island, let alone northern New England, and now you see them all over the place. So these are because of our milder winters. Cardinals, titmice, red-bellied woodpeckers, just to name a few, are more southern species, which are now very common in New England. So you can see that through, since over the past 40 years, numbers of birds are down. Species, not all that reduced, but it is changing. And this is something that's been going on. So it's not just something that is recently discovered. People who watch birds have been seeing this going on for a while, but it's very startling, I think, to have this long set of data that Cornell and National Audubon and us and others have put together to say, yeah, there's a real problem and something needs to be done about it, and it's very complicated. The thing is that back in 1970, peregrine falcons and osprey and bald eagles were almost extinct. But we figured out what to do. It's good lobbying. You remember Rachel Carson in Silent Spring? Well, her testimony was back in the 1960s. Took a while, but we got DDT banned in the US. And so there are now more peregrine falcons today than there were even prior to the invention of DDT, just through recovery efforts. So, as I say, sure, there are problems that we need to try to address to try to protect birds and other wildlife in these habitats, but we've been through this before, and I think people, if there's a will, there's a way. People will make the changes, we hope, but it's going to take a lot of work. Concerted effort of changing people's habits, educating people so that they will take this seriously. I think there are great role models, young people like Greta Thunberg, who's speaking on an international scale, sounding the alarm. So to me, there is hope that you can't just look at it from a fatalistic, like, oh well, this is bad. What can I possibly do? I think there's a role for everybody to play their role.
It seems to me that there is such a complexity to nature that we don't recognize, we don't live with, we don't really think through, such as you change one element, DDT, in the environment, and suddenly there's 7 types of bird that are now more prevalent and surviving with more health. Mm-hmm. And we don't think about that as we live, and certainly large business or large building does not think that way, or what I think of as sprawl does not think that way. I once cut a tree down and I didn't really think about it. It was kind of ugly, and suddenly I looked on the ground and there was a nest. So I had done something that was very similar to what all the big box stores are doing now with cutting, but I wasn't thinking that way. I wasn't thinking about what habitat is this, who is it for. It was birds, but it was probably insects as well. So everything we do has a major and sort of a macro and a micro effect. So tell me about insecticides now. What are we doing? I know that there's a big push on right now to change the way we fertilize our food, for example.
So pesticides and insecticides have been around for forever, and we use them because pests damage our crops and they damage our plants at home. And we rely on the federal government to set limits on the pesticides, and here in Rhode Island, the DEM implements those pesticide laws. About 3 years ago, Audubon got concerned about particularly the neonicotinoid pesticides, insecticides, and their impact on pollinators. And we became part of a group called the Pollinator Working Group that was established by our state legislator to examine how pollinators are doing in Rhode Island and what are some things we can do to protect them. And that group met for 2 years, and we came out with a suite of recommendations, some of them reasonably simple, some of them pretty complicated. So there's a lot of things individuals can do at their own homes, limit the amount of pesticides that they use. I think it's important for everybody to realize that you can go to the hardware store and buy a bottle of something to spray at an ant or a mosquito or something that's bothering you at home. But that spray is also killing a lot of other insects, and you need to realize that. So when you're concerned about pests in your environment, know that there is no treatment that'll just treat that one pest. You're killing a lot of other critters as well. And we need all these beneficial insects.
So when you go to the store, what do you ask for? You ask for something that's organic.
You don't go to the store to ask for it. You start by looking at integrated pest management websites and experts who can see if they can help you manage that pest without buying chemicals to manage it. The University of Rhode Island Master Gardeners has a hotline that people can call and talk through pest problems at their home. And you're better off not trying to go to chemicals, because one of the things we learned, that I learned in our pollinator working group, is that many of the sprays that you go and buy that say they're organic are actually as toxic or maybe more toxic than the synthetic chemicals that you buy. So there's no easy answer of some chemical you can go buy at the store that'll be safe.
Rather shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, and then the other things so having habitat for pollinators, it's the same thing with birds. What's causing the numbers of birds to decrease? You mentioned sprawl. Part of it is sprawl. We're paving over everything. We're cutting down trees. We're removing natural habitat areas where birds live and where insects need to live. But those of us who have a home and a yard, there's things you can do at your own home to make it a wilder, more inviting place for nature. You can, making it look like a golf course, all landscaped, is not making it a good place for wildlife, but letting it go wild and having wildflowers and native plants in your yard. Allowing the growth from last year of your plants to stay in the yard, so those stems then become places for insects to grow and to lay their eggs in the spring. So those are just, there's a lot of things that we can do. And even if you live in an apartment, you can have, if you have a little patio, you can put plants out on that patio and provide nectar and pollen for insects that are coming around. I mean, another thing that we learned that I thought was fascinating is these studies that look at the health of pollinators find that in urban areas, often they're doing better because you're not spraying as much chemicals for treating agriculture in the city. So they're protected from the pesticides in the city, and the pollinators can do all right.
I had read a couple of years ago about farms that were starting now, that Rhode Island was unusual and that it had new farms that were growing here. Mm-hmm. And the reason was because people were looking at organic or holistic or sustainable farming and sustainable land use, crop use.
Yep, and we have a lot of young people that are interested in agriculture. So millennials who would like to have a little farm and do an organic farm. And one of the challenges that they often have is finding land to farm, which is why, as Larry said, I think maybe before we started, there are land trusts in the state that protect land so it can't be developed. But often it's used for agriculture, and sometimes that agriculture is beginning farmers that need land to farm on.
It's a great idea. Is there any way you're going to give some of your land to people who want to farm? It just seems like that's an important project for governors to look at, for that large oversight over canopy, whatever, to understand how they can encourage city kids even to begin to start to farm in a different way, or at least raise some of their own food in a certain way.
Absolutely.
And that would take a lot of that kind of education. Let's talk about water for a minute. Water is so much a part of Rhode Island, that it seems to me that we need to start thinking differently about the way we even recreate on the water.
So I'll talk a little bit about water quality.
Sure.
I mean, so my specialty in my career has been water quality. And when you think about the environmental movement over decades, often it's discouraging, bad news, toxic chemicals. But when you talk about water quality, it's very much a good news story. Narragansett Bay is much, much, much cleaner now than it was 30, 40 years ago, even 20 years ago. We have improved the treatment of wastes that are discharged to the bay and to the rivers that feed the bay. The Narragansett Bay Commission, the big wastewater treatment facility in Providence, has these deep tunnels. So when it rains, an awful lot of the polluted runoff ends up in these big tunnels and then gets treated. So we don't have polluted runoff coming from big portions of our urban area on the Upper Bay. So water quality in our environment is in many ways a good story, a good news story. We continue to have runoff pollution, non-point source, stormwater pollution is the biggest cause of water pollution that remains. And it is a very difficult problem to address. It's how we live on our land. It's all the paved areas that we have, all the commercial areas that we have. But even on that one, I feel like there's a movement now and good news with treating stormwater with green infrastructure, nature-based treatment of stormwater, putting in rain gardens and swales, removing pavement, giving rain an opportunity to soak into the ground where it falls. The soil itself treats the water and filters the water and cleans it.
Isn't that amazing?
I know. You can't do it everywhere, but I think one of the things that we're learning is you may not clean it up entirely, but anytime you can do that, you're going to clean it up somewhat, and that's a good thing.
Climate change is real, and global warming is real. And what does the Audubon Society of Rhode Island say about that? I mean, what are you doing to educate others, or what do you feel about that?
You're right. I mean, climate change is something we're all going to have to deal with. Either try to do our part to help mitigate it, and that comes down to personal habits. People, trying to conserve energy. They say the cleanest energy is the energy not used. Rhode Island is actually very lucky to have some of the highest efficiencies in per person in fossil fuel use. However, we are going to need to accept that solar panels and wind turbines, whether they're off the shore or on land, are going to become new energy sources. I think when they're planning for that, I think we need to be very careful that we don't despoil the natural environment as we're doing it, and to leave.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
and to leave corridors of important areas where birds and other wildlife can migrate through, connected corridors. And Audubon's very involved with this program called the Last Green Valley, which is Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. There are some really special places that are connected, and because let's face it, as the temperatures rise, plants and animals will start to migrate north. So when I say migrate, obviously a tree can't migrate, but boreal trees will probably become less and less and more disease prone here, and we'll have more southern temperate kind of forests. So as Audubon owns and manages close to 10,000 acres of land in the state. We own about 1% of the state. We have other partners, DEM, the Nature Conservancy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who also own that. Together, if we are managing our properties with the anticipation that the species may change, well, that's a good way to do it, as opposed to trying to recreate a previous, kind of ecosystem.
Which is impossible.
Right. And then
I want to thank you for being here. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have no time left. We could probably talk for a couple hours, but thank you for being here.
Well, thank you.
And I'm glad to hear that there's positive improvement. Or positive, what is it? It's not putting a finger in the dike. It's really saying there are different ways to live, and we need to live that way.
Right.
So thank you for watching Good News Rhode Island. I'm getting told to hurry. I hope that you will investigate Rhode Island Audubon and take part in some of their programs. Thank you for watching.